Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Um, First, I'd like to ask, what's the house rule or on the house campus as far as wearing masks?
Is that question to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you repeat it? What's the rule on wearing
Yeah.
masks on the
Yeah.
on the house floor, or on the campus, or
On the campus.
I have no idea right now. I think there's a mandate of wearing it, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying you're sitting pretty close to somebody, and I believe there's a mask mandate that you guys are both ignoring, which is frustrating. It just shows the perception behind some of this. So I'll move on. When we're talking about this being clarifying legislation, right? We're talking about this being clarifying legislation. You're not writing a new law. You're not expanding it. You're saying you're clarifying it. When will you be clarifying it for the flu? Representative Gable, Leader Gable, you've had a bill to require kids to get the HPV vaccination. What about hepatitis or AIDS? What other vaccinations will we be later requiring or not allowing a conscientious objection to?
Muted.
Yeah. Well, there are many vaccinations that are required for school children. This law, it does not address those vaccinations for school children. All it's addressing is COVID-19 during a worldwide pandemic.
So will you be able to come back and clarify that this also requires people to take the flu shot?
No,
No, you will not.
no.
Why can you only clarify that it applies to COVID?
That this bill clarifies COVID.
Why can you not later come back with a clarification?
We can do any bills we want in the future. We can have many different kinds of bills.
So are you changing the law or are you
What I'm
clarifying?
bringing, that's not what I'm bringing to the General Assembly today. Today, I'm bringing a bill to you that that provides an additional piece to the healthcare Right of Conscience Act that states that it does not apply for COVID-19.
So today, for your purposes today, you are quote unquote clarifying that this only applies to COVID. But next week you come back and clarify, quote unquote, that this also applies to the HPV vaccine. Could you not?
I'm not going to say what could be done in the future. Today, we're talking about this bill.
You are using this narrow scope, which I would say changes the law, not clarifies the law, to go after COVID because people are scared. You are using people's fears to try to force people to do something that they are concerned about for their own health care. For their own health care, they are concerned. I am so tired of people saying anti-vaxxers. Do you know how many people I've had in my office that every year get the flu vaccine? Every single year get the flu vaccine. But they're concerned about a vaccine that came about, what, less than a year ago? Has not been approved by the FDA.
It has been now.
No.
The bill has been now.
What has?
The vaccine has been approved by the FDA. Pfizer.
Okay, Pfizer has. So they can require Pfizer, but they can't require. Pfizer has been approved. Can they allow Moderna or J&J?
I think they have. Yes.
So it's a person's choice. I don't understand at what point this ends. At what point does the government stop telling people what's best for them?
Yes. Well, I think
without them being able to take their health care into their own hands, right? Yes. I think that if I go into the doctor and they tell me today that I have cancer and I choose not to do chemotherapy, I have a right to not do that.
That doesn't affect all these other people around you. That's not a communicable disease. We are doing this to address a communicable disease that has worldwide impact, that has
So
killed
let's talk
5
about the flu.
million people
Let's
worldwide.
talk about the flu. I have a coworker who whose daughter almost died from the flu. Do you want to require the flu vaccine?
It is not at the same numbers that we're talking about with COVID.
Look at the history of the
You
flu.
consider flu being a worldwide pandemic?
It
No.
was at one point.
No, but it's not now. This is a very specific bill to address a very specific problem that is a public health emergency that we are trying to address.
How many years of research do we have on this COVID vaccine?
It just came up. I don't know, many people I know are grateful to have this vaccine.
And so because those individuals are grateful, that allows you to force people to not be able to make a healthcare decision.
Nobody's forcing anybody.
You're allowing this because you want the governor to be able to mandate this stuff without the General Assembly being involved, by the way.
No,
Right?
no.
We have not been involved up to this point. We have not had a discussion about COVID. So now you're trying to pass this and pretend like it's not about COVID, even though it's clarifying specifically for COVID so that the governor can mandate this on people.
No,
Correct?
no.
Well, that's not why.
No.
So then why do you need to do this?
I have
if
said
it's
this
not
many-
because of the governor's mandates.
This is to help employers, the relationship between employers and employees.
Gotcha. So we're making sure that we protect corporations over individuals.
We are making sure that we are protecting the health of the people.
Nope. You were talking about, and earlier, Tiffany from the governor's office stated that we're concerned about the liability of businesses. We're concerned about the liabilities of daycares. We're concerned about the liability. They didn't once say anything about the concern for the health care of the individuals. Not once.
Well,
So this, to
It's
be
the
out there and
people-
pretend this is
No.
about power. This is
No.
about forcing people to do something they don't want to do. And by the way, I specifically asked the governor's people, right? Because the governor doesn't really talk to very many people. So I specifically asked, I said, look, if you get rid of the mandates, I will help encourage people to get the vaccine. People are tired of mandates. They are so tired of mandates that they've dug their heels in, and now you're going to force them. You're going to force them under penalty of law or losing their livelihoods. You're going to make them lose their livelihoods. You're going to kick them out of their jobs because some people feel more comfortable with the vaccine.
Different employers have different rules, but I have to tell you that this is really to protect our students in our schools. It's to protect our people in our nursing homes. It's to protect veterans in veterans' homes, people in healthcare facilities. Those are the employers that where this has been an issue.
So you're going to force state employees to get it. You're going to force teachers to get it. You're going to force daycare workers to get it. Eventually, you're going to force kids in schools to get it. Where does this stop? It is about an individual's ability to make a healthcare decision. You know what?
So this isn't just about vaccines, Representative. It's also about masking. It's about testing.
Which
There are
you're
people
not
that
wearing
say,
right now, right next to somebody.
Actually, it's not required. It's required in the chamber and in the hallways. It's not required in a room. There's only two of us. He's sitting here.
Few of us
So
off camera.
it's not,
Are you-
it's not around hundreds of people like as we have in the chamber.
So
I
it's
normally-
okay if you're supposed to social distance. And I believe when I walked into the door of the Stratton building this morning, there's a mask that requires you to wear or a sign that requires you to wear a mask. This is, you are forcing people to do something against their will, forcing them to take a vaccine against their will because it makes some people feel more comfortable. Right?
No.
This is their life.
This is an employer's ability to protect their workers and their people who, their customers and the people that they serve
by forcing a healthcare decision
during
and
a
not allowing
worldwide
them to make
pandemic.
an honest, concerned decision for themselves, for their own healthcare. So
Different
if
employers
there
have
are
different
adverse outcomes
standards.
to this, who is liable now? Is the state of Illinois liable now?
No.
If a business decides to mandate something, who is liable?
Maybe the AG's office can help me here, or the governor's office.
Yeah,
Somebody has to be liable.
For
I'll
what?
just
What are they liable for?
again, this is
Adverse
not
reactions to
about
the vaccine that
liability.
was
This is about
required by law,
clarifying the-
required by individuals, by businesses.
Okay.
Go
This is
ahead.
about
Sorry.
clarifying the existing law. This is not about liability. This is about, as Leader Gable had indicated, this is about protecting the individuals within the corporations, within the childcare facilities, within the schools, within the healthcare facilities. It is about protecting those individuals who want to ensure that there are workplace safety measures in place.
Tiffany, you specifically said earlier that you were worried about business liability. So who takes over that liability if a business requires this? Now the state is allowing them to require this without an individual's personal health care decision. Who takes on the liability? Somebody has to take on the liability. So is it on the individual who was forced to take it?
Yeah.
And go ahead. I think you're on mute still.
If I can help here a little bit. So I believe what Tiffany was referring to earlier today is the way the law actually works is that an employee can sue an employer for not following the law. And there are financial repercussions for losing a lawsuit for an employer. So what we've done here is try and work to protect not only citizens, but employers by not allowing this one particular act to be used in a lawsuit. Again, other acts they're able to avail themselves of other acts of other federal laws, but this particular act would not be allowed. So that's the clarification that we've made here. We've not mandated anything. There is no mandatory vaccine in here. There's no mandatory masking, no mandatory testing. That does not exist here in this language.
The mandates are on the outside directly from the governor through executive order. So this is the gutless General Assembly sitting on the sideline saying, Governor, we got your back, but we don't really want to make a real decision on COVID. We want to let you, we want to take away the individual healthcare rights of the individual, and that will allow you to mandate this. That's what it sounds like to me. We're dealing with individual healthcare decisions. And the state of Illinois is going to allow an outside individual, an outside entity to force this upon other people. Correct?
Representative, as I stated to Representative Mazzocchi, mandates from an employer have already been in place here. This does not change that. This simply clarifies what the intent of the Healthcare Right of Consciousness Act was meant to be.
So where is that clarification coming from? How do you know that when they wrote this law that they wanted COVID exempt from this law if COVID didn't exist when this law came through?
Representative, what we know from the legislative history is what they intended for the law to actually cover. And what that was intended to actually cover was individuals who did not want to provide abortion care and giving them the ability to opt out of that without facing repercussions from their employer. And if their employer did provide those repercussions, then they could file suit. So that was the entire legislative history. There was no mention of any other diseases. Obviously, COVID-19 is new, but other diseases have existed. And at that time, that discussion was not there in the legislative history.
So why do you have to specify COVID? Why don't you just leave it open? Because then it would cover the flu, HPV, whatever a company wants to require of their employees, they can require, right? Without any conscientious objection. Correct? If you're saying
Representative,
the original intent, and it was discussed earlier that the original intent of the law is whatever the law says, right? The interpretation is up to a court. So why would, even if this passes, would an employee still be able to sue a business?
yes, an employee can always sue a business. What we're saying here is that the Healthcare Right of Consciousness Act does not apply in this situation. As stated earlier, if an employee has a religious objection, that can apply. If there's a Title VII objection, that can apply. There are all types of other objections and reasons for suing an employer that are not covered under the Healthcare Right of Consciousness Act. What we are stating here is that the original intent of the legislature did not intend to apply to COVID-19 mitigations. And so we are just clarifying that fact.
You cannot clarify that the original intent did not intend to apply to something that didn't exist when it went into place. Unless you're going to say everything, which then you're saying flu. Why say COVID? COVID is the hot button issue of the day. That's what you're using to get your foot in the door to not allow this to be required for COVID, for flu, for HPV, for hepatitis, for AIDS, whatever it may be. You are using this, you are using COVID and people's fear of COVID to force this through. So the reason this was put into place was to allow individuals to not be forced. So say a pharmacist to not be forced to make a decision that they didn't want to make. But does the individual have that same right to not be forced to make that decision, to force themselves to do it?
Representative, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So you're saying an individual has the right. So a pharmacist, a doctor, whoever it may be, has the right to not give a certain medication if they feel that it's not the right thing to do. Does an individual also have that right to make that decision for themselves if they believe it's not the right thing for them to do?
Respectfully, Representative Davidsmeyer, I don't know that that's germane to what we're talking about here. Specifically,
It certainly is. That's the whole point of this. That's exactly what you are trying to clarify. You are trying to clarify something which I don't know that, did they discuss the individual rights during this debate at all? Did they say this does not apply to an individual's right to deny healthcare? Did they specifically say that?
Representative, at the time of the debates, they talked about a health professional's right, but the act was always intended to be about patient care and limited to items around patient care. So we're kind of talking outside of the scope here.
So only someone licensed to provide care has the right to deny that care. So I'm not licensed as an individual because I'm not in healthcare, right? So I cannot deny healthcare to myself. I cannot say, I don't want that.
Representative, I'm not sure I understand the question.
You're saying my doctor can say, no, that's not right for you. But me as an individual, I can't say that's not right for me.
Representative, I did not state that.
Okay, can you explain why I don't have the same right that my doctor or my pharmacist has?
Representative,
As part of my healthcare.
I don't think that's germane to the conversation that we're having here about the Healthcare Right of Consciousness Act.
It certainly is. It certainly is. That's the entire reason that we're having this conversation, because you want the governor, the president want to force people to be vaccinated. They want to mandate people to be vaccinated. So if businesses mandate it, you want the business not to be liable. who is liable? Because the drug companies aren't liable. Pfizer's not liable. Moderna, J&J, they're not liable. Who's liable if something goes wrong? And they were forced to take the vaccine.
Representative, as we've stated, this does not stop other litigation. If an employee wanted to sue an employer on other grounds, that would be available.
All right, here's what we're gonna do here. Robin, you have a statement on this question that?
On this very question, there is the vaccine adverse reaction board and on the federal level that deals with all adverse reactions and cases that are brought to it. So there is a mechanism for that.
I'm sure that will comfort somebody that was forced to do something that ended their life. I'm sure that'll comfort their family, that maybe they'll get a few bucks. But at the end of the day, this is a personal healthcare decision. And you are forcing people to make a decision against their will. You either can make a living or you can make a healthcare decision, but you can't make both.
Employers,
in the state of Illinois, at least.
Employers have been able to require their employees to have vaccinations for a very long time.
And vaccinations that have had many years of history.
And they haven't been in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, so. You know,
So
you can't
how
take
many
this out of
employers
context. You
require
can't
those
take it out
other
of context,
vaccines?
Representative? You can't take
What-
this out of context.
And you are taking it
We're
out of
not dealing
context
in
by
normal
saying you're
time.
clarifying it for COVID, when technically you're saying they can't use this conscientious objection for the flu. They can't use it for HPV. You are using COVID. You're using COVID because it's the hot button issue of the day.
That's not true. And you've
Yes,
said.
it is. It is completely and utterly true. That's the whole reason why you put COVID in there. So, this is
Not
an
true.
absolutely ridiculous bill. You're trying to take people's healthcare rights away and pass the liability off to basically nobody.
No,
So-
my goal, first of all, the federal government has liability. And secondly, my goal here is to save lives.
And not allow people to make their own healthcare decisions. I understand.
All right, thank you, Representative Wheeler.